All right, looks like we're going to go ahead and get started with February's edition of WebTips. Again, my name is Lance Yoder. I'm a longtime Winshuttle user, and I've been using Winshuttle and SAP now for probably 10 years or so, and I was the recipient of a Winshuttle's Golden Brushy Award back in earlier years as a Winshuttle customer, and here's some just snippets of myself at the Winshuttle conferences and the like, and having a good time. So this month, we're going to start with a transaction script demonstration on how to record the CS01 transaction with Winshuttle Studio. So CS01 is the T code we would use to create a bill of material within SAP. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with that. Let me get SAP open here, and we'll start here. So first thing I'm going to do with any transaction script recording, I always want to prepare myself to understand what the screens look like, what data I need, and so on, to go ahead and make that recording successful. So the planning just helps to make sure I have the right data, minimizes the number of times that you have to re-record, and so on. So I'm going to go ahead and enter the T code CS01 here, and all right, here we have the bill of material initial screen. I'm going to enter my material and plant and bill of material usage of 1. I've been using this material a number of times to test, so I'm going to get a warning message saying that there's already bill of material created for it, which is okay. I'll go ahead and continue once that warning message pops up. All right, there's that warning. Go ahead and bypass that. All right, so here we have our main screen. We are going to have to manage, doing multiple items. So within a bill of material, you have, many items that you want to add to the bill of material. So we want to make sure we understand how we're going to navigate through this screen in order to incorporate looping within our Winshuttle script. So, I'm looking around. I don't see any plus buttons down here. It says, add new row or here, but I do see this new entries button. So I think this may come into play for us. So what we're going to do is just going to practice here. I'm going to add in my first row of information, give it a quantity of 10. I'm going to hit enter, see what happens. Looks like it's validating the component. Hopefully we'll get the description here. All right, sure enough, did. Okay, so I'm going to hit the new entries and see what happens. Okay, well, it didn't look like anything happened, so I'm going to go ahead and enter another line item and enter a few line items just to understand how this screen is working. Go ahead and hit enter. Okay, I get my second one. I'm going to hit new entries again. Okay, now it looks like something happened. So when I hit the new entries button, everything shifted up and exposed the second row as the row for entry. All right, so if I add another item, I'm going to add a third item in here and repeat this process. You can see I'm on item 30. I'm going to hit new entries again. All right, sure enough, it bumped everything up. So within my looping process, after I enter the first row, and I'm going to enter the first row sort of manually without the looping process just to get my Excel file lined up the way I want to, then I'm going to start using this new entries button to generate my loop. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel this, exit this so I can use the same material in the recording, and then we'll go ahead and get started with the Winshuttle transaction script and get that recording started. So as soon as this exits out here, do I want to say nope? All right, that should back out for me. All right, so I have Winshuttle Studio up here. I'm going to go ahead and do a new recording from a transaction script, do a recording. I'm going to select my system and log in. And here we go. All right, so I'm going to use the CS01 transaction, and my recording mode is standard. So let's take a look at the recording modes. I have standard, batch input mode, and GUI scripting. I'm just going to stick with standard for right now, and we'll discuss this later on. Go ahead and start that recording. All right, looks like SAP has not yet popped open a new window. All right, let's try to find that SAP screen, see if it's hiding somewhere. There it is. It was on the, it was hiding. All right, I'll go ahead and enter my material. The plan and the BOM usage, go ahead and validate this. I'm going to get that same warning message, but Winshuttle will not capture that warning message, so we'll be okay. So as soon as I get that warning message, I'll just hit enter to skip that warning message and get into my main screen here. Okay, so I'm going to repeat the process. I'm going to use the item category of L, put in my first component, quantity of 10, hit enter. Now, the screen reacted a little bit differently here. Now, if you recall in my practice run, when I hit enter, it just validated the material, stayed on that item screen where I could add more items, and then I just moved through that process. But here in my recording, it's acting a little bit differently. After I hit enter, SAP is navigating me to a subscreen. On this particular subscreen, I don't want to add any information. I'm going to hit enter again. Now I'm getting a second subscreen with some line item text information. I do want to add some information. I want to say insert into location 1, validate component installed properly. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter again. Now it takes me back to my item overview screen. All right, now I've entered my first line. Now I'm going to start my looping process. So when I'm doing my recording, I'm only going to add one more item, but I want to add it in a way that allows me to do looping within my recording. So even though I have the second line available, you can see here the second line is available for entry. I want to record hitting this new entries button. So then the beginning of my loop will always hit that button regardless of how many items I have in my loop. So I've hit that button. I'm going to go ahead and add my second item to the recording. Give a quantity of 15. I'll hit enter. It's going to take me to the subscreen. Hit enter again. I'll use insert into location 2 and validate install properly. Now I get back to my main screen. Now for recording purposes, I don't want to add any more rows because it's just going to get picked up in my recording and then I'll have to delete it. So at this point, I'm just going to save my transaction. And it's been taking a little bit longer here this morning than normal as I was practicing for the webinar. So let's just hang tight here for a second while it's finishing up the recording and bringing up the mapping process. All right, it sure is taking its time here during our demonstration. That's how it always goes. All right, well, if it doesn't close up here in a minute, I do have a recording already completed where the mapping is done, and I can go from that. So we'll just give it, it looks like it's wrapping up here. There we go. This waiting makes for good demonstrations, doesn't it? Hopefully we'll be ready to go here. If not, I'll open up another script and we can go from there. But it looks like we're just one step away from getting to our mapping screen. Okay, I'm going to see if I can open up another session of Studio and allow ourselves to continue here. And of course, as soon as I tried to do that, I got my mapping screen. Okay, so now we can continue here. So I'm going to start with the mapping process. I'm just going to remove the allow validation. I don't use that quite often. It is useful for some folks. I choose not to use it too much, but I'm going to start the mapping process. I generally start with my log field in the first column. So I'm going to select the run log here, and I'm going to drag it down to column A. Generally like them at the beginning because I know column A is always available. So regardless of the script that I create, if I keep the run log consistent and column A, I never have to worry about where my data needs to be. And I can always see column A on my screen. Now it's up to you how you want to do that. The next thing we need to worry about is leaving a column blank for the looping process. So as you add a loop into your script, you have to accommodate a header detail row. So that tells the loop, okay, which row is the header row and which rows are your items that you're going to add to your bill of material. So I'm going to leave column B blank. Again, when I do looping, I like to have that pretty clear right up front, which rows are the header and which ones are the detail. So I'm going to go ahead and start mapping the rest of these items. So I'm going to have material, plant, BOM usage. Okay, now I'm getting into my first line item. I'm not within my loop yet, because remember I did that first item in that first row. So I'm just going to map this one here from column F, BOM component in column G, quantity in H, and then I have my two lines of text I'm going to add in I and J. All right, so now I have my second line item that I'm going to be looping around. I'm not doing my looping yet. Right now I'm just getting my Excel file set up. So I want to map into the same columns that I did in the first line item. So I'm going to reuse column F here for the item category of the second row. And notice now I have two items mapped to column F. And it's noting here in the header that for row 1, that's indicated by the 01, and row 2, both columns are mapped into that particular field there. So I'm going to go ahead and continue the rest. G, and then column H with the quantity, and then my first line of text, and then my second line of text. Okay, so now I have my mapping done. I like to use the basic view for mapping because it shows all of the fields that I touched, and I don't need to see all the OK codes and things of that nature. It gives me a quicker way to do the mapping. But now I need to enter my loop condition. So I'm going to go to the expert view now, and we're going to go ahead and add the loop into the appropriate part of our script. So here we have our initial screen where we're entering the material number. And then the first screen where we started entering the first line item, you can see here indicated by 01, that's the first row of the data grid as we started entering the material. And then here's the button, the OK code, when we entered the new items or new entries button. So that's where I want my loop to start. Okay, and then I want to find where I want my loop to end. So this is when I started entering the second row of BOM information, then my line item. So I'm going to just hit the shift key and select the last row. So it highlighted all the rows in between, and then I'm going to hit create loop. Okay, by highlighting the fields ahead of time, you can see here the loop incorporates all the fields that I wanted. So if you had just selected row 23, you could use the up and down arrow here to get to row 39. You don't have to highlight it beforehand. It's just a shortcut for me to make sure that I can see exactly where I want to start and stop, and then go from there. So by default, the loop identifier column, Winshuttle is going to look at the last mapped field and then go to the next row. Well, if you recall, I left column B blank for my loop identifier, so I'm going to select column B, hit go, and I'm using column B. All right, so now I have everything mapped. I'm going to go ahead and save this here, and we'll call it CS01 WEBtips 2, because I think I have one from this morning when I practiced. And we'll go ahead and save those to the Winshuttle Documents folder. Okay, so now I have everything set to go. I'm going to take a look at my data file. I need to add my first row back in there. So I'll go ahead and just copy this row, set up my data file to have 2 rows of data, and change that to different material, and insert into location 1. I'm going to go ahead and add a third one as well. And we'll change the quantity so we can see the differences. And I'll change the third component to be 101-100, insert into location 3. All right, now here's my data file all set up. I need the D at the beginning to identify that this is a second line item. So I'm going to hit save beforehand, and then I'm going to go ahead and run this script. All right, so it's starting to validate the run. It's checking the data that's in the data file to see if I have any rules around the proper data that should be in the data file, and now it's executing the transaction. All right, things are taking a bit longer than normal here today. Hopefully this will be done momentarily. There we go. Okay, so it completed, but it failed. All right, so this is one of the things I wanted to show, why we picked this particular T code for WEBtips is because of this little bit of a complexity. So since it failed, oftentimes the first thing I do is I go into debug mode so I can see step by step what's going on. So let's go ahead and do that and see if we can do a step-by-step to understand where the script is failing. Usually when you get no batch input data for screen, that means SAP is on a screen that Winshuttle is not expecting SAP to be on, and then it errors on that screen. So let's take a look at how this is working here. So we have our OK code. We're going through our first items. Everything looks good so far. Enter my first item. Hit enter. Okay, well now I lost my OK code, so this is where the screen is being stuck. So if you recall, when we did our manual test, this is sort of the response that we got. I put in a material, I hit enter, and it just stayed on the screen after validating the material. Yet when I did the recording, I hit enter, it took me to another screen, the subscreens, and I entered some information on the second subscreen. So here we have an instance where when you manually do it within SAP, you get one response. When you record it, you get a different response. And then when you play it back, it doesn't play back the same way you recorded it, and we sort of have this issue here. So what I want to show you in this demonstration here is an option for you to maybe correct this without having to re-record in a different mode. So if we look back at the mapping screen, when we go back to the mapping, there's this recording mode over here that says standard, right? If you recall, when I brought up the recording modes, there were standard, batch, and GUI. Well, standard says non-batch with SAP controls. Instead of just picking the standard, I'm going to pick non-batch with SAP controls. So notice that this screen here has 4 or 5 different options, actually a total of 6 different options for recording, not listing GUI scripting here because you can't record a script in non-GUI scripting mode and then change it to GUI scripting mode. You would have to re-record in that case. But if you're not using GUI scripting, there's options within standard in batch that you can pick from. So I'm going to switch from standard to non-batch with SAP controls, save my script, and then I'm going to go run it again. I'm just going to hit the test button here, and we should be able to reprocess that first row, and we'll see what happens here with the second run. Okay, just as a reminder, if you have any questions that you want to ask, everyone is on mute right now, but feel free to enter a question into the GoToWebinar, and we'll take a moment to answer those questions here. Okay, so after we changed the recording mode or the playback mode from just standard to non-batch, we were able to have success. So I played it back, it worked. Now if we wanted to, we can do a debug to see how that has changed our process. Now obviously it worked, but just for demonstration purposes, let's see if we can do a step-by-step to validate the difference between how the screens operate. All right, so here is our T code again. Now this is where it failed the last time when I hit enter. So when I hit enter this time, it takes me to through those subscreens. All right, so I'm getting the second subscreens, and now it's acting just like we're expecting to. So we're entering our second line item, going through the subscreens. Now we're entering our third line item. Notice it shifted up just like we were expecting to, entering the new component and going through the screens. And then now that we're done, it's going to save the transaction, and then we've completed. So this sort of wraps up what we wanted to cover today with WEBtips and covering the CS01 transaction. So let me take a look at if there are any questions. I'll just wait 1 second. So what did we learn? All right, we learned about how to, for one, record this transaction, and two, utilizing the different recording modes even after you've recorded it to assist with debugging. There are a couple other transactions where this happens. So instead of re-recording, try to just switch that recording mode to see if that solves your problem. And if not, maybe you need to record in a different mode right from the start. So, okay, it does not look like there are any questions coming in through the GoToWebinar. So at this point, I'm just going to wrap up our session. Thanks everyone for joining today. Sorry for the little delays in between. We'll get this recording up on our website for you to pass on and review at a later time. Thanks again so much for joining, and have a great day.